is, by repetition, Hikaru 12 and a half seconds on his clock, so he didn't go all the way down, but he did burn some important time potentially, because if Magnus can't score some victories and then he starts cutting to lead in bullet, he needs all the time that he can get.
Yeah, no, this is totally valid. Totally valid match strategy. And a little change as Magnus tries to keep more life on the board. He doesn't just want another one of those draws. He plays the old school Briar system.
Yeah, this like Zaitsev, Briar. He's keeping everything defended for black, but at the same time, you're quite passive. So white strikes on the queen side with a4, and now you have to be very careful if you're Magnus. The b5 pawn, it sticks out like a sore thumb. It can get in trouble if white piles up pressure on it, but he brings his knight to b6. He's challenging the a4 pawn.
The b3 would restrict the knight. The Briar system, named after Gyula Briar, Hungarian player from the 1920s, one of the hyper-modernists alongside Richard Redi and Nimzovich and others who modernized openings and played a lot of stuff that we still play to this day. And I think modern computers don't particularly like the Briar, but it is a relatively fresh position and one that Hikaru might not have looked at in a while. That's at least what Magnus's thinking goes.
And that's smart. That's how you prepare at the highest level, because all players are well versed in a variety of openings. You need to catch your opponent off guard. And the last move, Bishop D3, may have caught Magnus a little bit off guard, because he's sitting and thinking his idea behind the move A6 to A5 was to put his bishop on A6 and start taking over light squares on the queen side. So the bishop comes to D3 to stop that plan. In comes Hikaru's bishop to B5. I don't really like the look of the move C7 to C6. I know you block the bishop and attack it, but your bishop on b7 will look silly.
Ooh, and neither does Magnus, but neither does the eval bar like the look of rook to e6. This invites d5, Robert, and d5 opens up a pathway for the dark squared bishop. Isn't d5 just good for white? What am I missing?
It is. Right, we see the evaluation bar go up, but I feel like if you're not precise, this is a position that gives black some chances to strike back, because you've closed the center, and maybe at some point you can try to play on the king side. The issue is you're never getting f7 to f5 in, even if you move your knight, because look at the pawn on e4 and the knight on g3. White is just ready to meet that pawn break.
Yeah, bishop to g5, inducing f6. Now drop the bishop back to e3. He goes bishop f6, but still, you now can no longer play the move f5.
Wouldn't be surprised if Hikaru plays h4. He plays bishop e3 instead. I thought he might just try to keep his bishop in place. But the knight comes up to c5. Take me, please, says Magnus. Give me the bishop pair. And maybe it's, I was going to say time for bishop g5, but I forgot the rook is awkwardly placed on e7.
I don't like this. I don't like this one bit. This is actually a position very reminiscent of a King's Indian structure on both sides of the board. And normally when you get a knight ensconced on c5 like this, black freezes white's pressure. But here comes the knight. Around to b3 it goes. And once white goes c5, that's like stepping on something with your shoe. Bang, crunch. And black's queenside can collapse real fast.
It's looking bad for Magnus Carlsen right now. He would like to connect his knight. But as you're pointing out, the knight is going to b3 anyway. There's just no pressure in the position. Black has nothing here.
Nope. And I'll tell you what black has. A 1-minute deficit on the clock.
Not good. King g7 is a very Magnus-like move, but he has to already watch out for bishop takes c5 and knight b3. That you might just lose a pawn in positions like that. Knight b3 by itself is looking strong, and you see Hikaru. He keeps raising his eyebrows. He's like, what is going on in this match? Something about Magnus's play seems very off.
And that decision to play rook e6, I know I have the benefit of the eval bar. I get that, but put that aside. Very uncharacteristic misjudgments, intuitive misjudgments, errors in calculation. And the problem when you're down by 3 is that you lose all of your momentum. If Hikaru wins this game, it's as if nothing ever happened. It's as if Magnus never won that first game.
It's true.
Bishop g5. Look,
bishop g5, f6, and bishop takes f6. You don't have rook f7. So he trades.
But what's the idea here? He sacks the pawn to keep the knight alive on c5. That I actually really like from the world champion.
This is positional brilliance, because he gives up material to keep the knights on the dark squares. And if you can play bishop a6 or bishop d7 and trade off that light square bishop, a4 and c4 and e4 and d3 and b3, all these squares are vulnerable to black's knights.
You're absolutely right. And this is the Magnus that we're used to. He's shown signs of life in the 3-minute portion, but can he finish this defensive effort? He's still worse, right? No question about that. Hikaru very much still playing for the win. And Hikaru might try to trade places. Maybe go bishop c6 and knight b5. He trades and will go knight b5, I assume. No, he puts his rook on the open file.
And the good news for Hikaru is he has all of those pawns protected. Now he's got a beautiful pawn chain, connect 4, and then other knight comes to c5 for Magnus. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a g5, h5, g4 at some moment just to get some kind of play on the king side. You're down a pawn there, but you can open up lines for your rooks.
And White has all the open lines he needs. He has exactly one open line, and he might put a second rook there and try to infiltrate b8. I don't know who exactly benefits in the event of a rook trade. What if both rooks are off the board? Is that knight endgame drawn? Questions that Magnus just doesn't quite have the time to answer.
But Hikaru's thinking here because he goes knight e2. And I guess if there's ever g5, he has knight g3 to f5. So you need to be careful before you push any pawn because the square that was previously under your control gets weak.
And maybe Magnus just wants to lock up the king side with h4 and g5. No, he does go g5. He allows knight g3, and I think Hikaru's going to play it.
There might be an exchange sack. I was wondering if he was going to play h4 and sack the exchange and bring his king up.
He's going for an attack. He wants to checkmate the white king on g1 eventually.
And he plays g4. The point is you take twice. e4 is hanging with check. So you cannot keep capturing on g4. The lines are opening up. And that's good news for Black's rooks and potentially bad news for the white king.
And even better news for Magnus. The clock situation beginning to equalize. Hikaru forced to calculate. And this has been phenomenal defense thus far by Magnus Carlsen. But can he keep it up? Rook to h8, preparing to occupy the open file he's created for himself. He's got the most counterplay he's had in a while.
And there's knight d3 check if you're not looking out. If you're Hikaru, there could be a knight d3 to f4. So he plays rook d1. He hangs the a4 pawn because he wants rook a1 at the end, winning the a5 pawn.
And maybe Magnus will just double on the g file. That pawn is a decoy, but it's a juicy pawn indeed.
Watch out for rook takes c5 and d6. I'm wondering if there's an exchange sack here.
Oh, just going for that knight on f5. No, Hikaru brings his rook back to a1. Magnus fine with a repetition.
He would be fine with repetition. Why not? He has 16 seconds. He's
go rook b8.
Down a pawn. He goes rook b8. I'm wondering if rook takes c5 will be played by Hikaru.
That would be an incredible call and very risky move, but a potentially rewarding move. That knight is a beast. But no, a draw.